have flights to catch this afternoon, including Chad over here, so we're going to try to get through a real quick introduction and get on to the presentation. My name is Kevin Bates. I'm General Manager for the Midwest region, and I also have additional responsibility for our TRAX Swiss turn product line. Hopefully you've all seen it since we've been here for a day at least. We did introduce our first Swiss style machine, the TRAX, back at Discover 2021. And it was at that point we had the 20 and 25 millimeter size machines, and we had 4 different axis configurations for each machine. At IMTS, just over a year ago, we introduced the 32 and 38 millimeter machines, again, both with 4 different axis configurations. So at the end of last year, we had 16 different models. What you saw on our floor today, hopefully, is the prototype for the 12 millimeter machine. So we'll have a 10 millimeter and a 12 millimeter machine, both in 7 and 8 axis versions. So in no less than 2 to 3 years, we have 16, 20 different models of machines in the Swiss turn line. So we are committed to the Swiss industry. The Swiss market is growing and it's becoming very popular among job shops. Chad Weigel from TRAX Automation, I've known him for a number of years through our distributor Northwest. Chad spoke at a Midwest Discover event, what did we say, 2015? And that was on multitasking, because he had hyper-quadratic style machines, twin spindle, twin turret. So when we got into this discussion for Discover, we wanted to find someone that had made that transition from a multitasking machine to a Swiss type machine and can speak to you, our customers, about why to look at Swiss style turning. Chad does a great job. So with everybody's flight schedules, I'll turn it over to Chad and look forward to seeing the presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, I'm Chad Weigel. I am the owner of TRAX Automation in Big Lake, Minnesota. We're a smaller shop, 20 machines, and we have about 6 or 8 people at all time. I was introduced to the Swiss machines in 2004 for a company that I worked for, and I thought, wow, this is easy. You can make money this way. This is nice. And it took a little while, and I had some ideas in my head, so I kept pushing forward, and then I started my own machine shop. And before that, we had, next year we have 15 machines, and then it was 20 machines, and it just grew from there. Like Kevin said, in 2015, we decided to go to a hyper-quadrix, and it was pushing. It wasn't that our machines couldn't handle what we were already doing. It just opened the door for more work and more availability, more efficiency. The hyper had options that our Swiss machines didn't have, and I think that's what you're going to see today too. If you've had a chance to look at the hyper-quadrix and the TRAX, is they're two totally completely different machines, but each one of them has their own, hype, their own thing that they're good at. Over the years, we've ran across tons of different parts that we thought were good parts for Swiss machines, but it turns out sometimes they're just not. And that's kind of why I'm here today, is to talk about some of the reasons why parts that go into Swiss machines or parts that go in a machine like a hyper-quadrix or other multitasking machines fit in a Swiss machine. So that being said, let's kind of move on, because I want to make this a little short and sweet. Swiss machine is primarily known for its small parts, high tolerances, tight tolerances, large volumes. They're quick. You can run, if you see 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 RPMs out of some of these spindles that are out there. And you also see long parts, short parts. You're able to turn parts that you were before that had small diameters, like 100,000, so you can turn it the whole length of the bar if you wanted to. And that's a huge option for, it opens you up to a new world of different parts to go when you start looking at stuff like that. This firing pin, or if you're in the medical world, these parts, they've always been made, but how did you make them? They were multiple operations, and it took sometimes 5 to 6 operations to make them. I don't know if anybody got a chance to see the thread whirling unit on the Mazak TRAX. I believe was that a 9 that was out there? And I mean, that thing, that's great. I mean, that's exactly what you want to see in a Swiss machine. So, there's really no perfect scenarios for either or. I mean, there's some parts that they're just going to run better, but that doesn't mean that somebody else doesn't put that same part in a different machine. What it opens or what it does for you is it gives you options, you know, inside your company. When we looked at high volume parts, which that's what we do at our shop, a Swiss machine fits that because of cycle time, but we also don't do a lot of intricate parts either. So a Swiss machine can also fit something that has, you know, a lot of milling, a lot of small milling. There's 5-axis machining capabilities on these machines. Like I said before, thread whirling. I mean, these are all great things that weren't available for us, you know, forever. You know, the speed and the technology that the way things are happening today, and obviously Kevin just gave an awesome example of how they went from 16 machines to 20 machines over, you know, since 2021. I mean, where will we be in 2031? You know, and that's how fast things are moving. I asked a great question to the guys earlier. What is one of the things that one of the machines that you would like to have in your house that you don't have? You know, there's some great answers, but to me, it's always something that fits. That's the next step in technology. You know, for us, the last time we just recently bought the TRAX, we bought it because we thought, well, we don't have a B-axis machine with full 5-axis capabilities, and that wasn't something that we thought was interesting. It opened a door for us to do different kinds of work. A lot of people can't do that, you know. So when you see, it also gives you a chance to make greater margins. You know, you're not second, third, fourth opting some of these parts. You need side holes or angle holes or things like that. Swiss machines are also known for their lights out production. A lot of guys love to run lights out. You can use them for low or medium or even high volume production parts. Like I said before, long parts, short parts, thread grinding, polygon machining. There was a machine out there that had polygon machining, which I thought was pretty awesome. Plus, you have your bar feeders and high pressure units. When you're choosing machine, lathe, or multitasking equipment, I think there's a wide variety of things that you could look at. One of the things is you know, the versatility and accuracy, rigidity, tool. You know, how many tool holders do you need? Is it a medium-sized part? Is it a big part? You know, what do you need? You know, to make this part. Also, we like to look at who's running. You know, who's running our parts. If for some reason, you know, you have, you know, you've had people, especially in this day and age, you have people that are either untrained or undertrained, or you're trying to grow something and people just aren't available. You know, this type of equipment can actually get you by in those short times. So, so I don't get my head of myself here. So, is there any questions so far? When we think about a lathe and a mill and a Swiss and we start looking at different jobs, the first thing we start thinking about is how we're going to quote a job. The way that we quote jobs can be different in a multitasking machine versus a Swiss machine. You've got to look at burden rates. You've got to look at, you know, how much per hour. You know, some of these machines, the floor space that they take up means something to you. You know, so that's something to always think about. And a lot of times in a Swiss machine, you'll give up a little bit more material or remnant. It's just the way things work. when you're looking at a machine or looking at a part and you're quoting a part, big thing to think about for Swiss machines is how many tools do I need? You know, will I have enough tools to make the job? You know, and then also if you look the other direction and say something like a hyperquadrics, where you can have multiple tools, you know, that is an advantage of one thing when going with that style of machine. The other thing to look at on a part when you're looking for a Swiss machine is how you're going to pick off on it. Most parts have like some kind of round diameter, but there are parts that have square, hex, and you got to make sure that you're able to do that, or to get over top of a diameter, or you know, on a small landing. You know, I mean, those are all big things to think about when you're programming or when you're quoting for a part. Is how you're going to get that part off the machine. Three other things that we think about it is complexity, manpower, and then our cycle time. You know, how much inspection do we have? Do we need to stop the machine for anything? I mean, that could make a difference between if we run it on a multitasking machine versus a Swiss. I mean, is there a tight diameter that we need to look at it? We also look at what kind of turning we're doing. If there's, you know, if we need the rigidity of a Swiss machine, or if you know, the lathe is fine. A lot of times, oil or coolant comes into play because of the type of machine. You know, most lathes you're gonna run coolant through, water soluble, and the Swiss machines you run oil. You know, when we look at manpower, we always try to line up make sure we have the right jobs for our employees. And I think that's a key thing. I've talked to quite a few people just the last couple days about how important it is to line your work up with the employees that you have in your shop. Your employee workload also comes into a big deal too, because if you got employees that are running 5 or 6 machines, and just things are not going to work out the way that you want them. Another thing to look at is what type of inspection equipment you have available to check your parts. So that's a big thing for us when we look at, you know, how we want to make or how we want to run a job through our shop. They have nowadays everything can be completely automated, or you can use just one micrometer and check every part manually. We've decided to automate most of our parts in our shop. The one thing that we do is when we put a bar stock in a machine, we don't touch it until it goes in packaging. You know, besides inspection, and that's a big time saver for us. Other key things with lathes and versus Swiss is lathes are able to have larger tools, especially like when it comes to drilling. They could take faster feeds of cuts when you're talking about roughing. You're not going to pull back. You know, when you're on a Swiss machine, there's a chance that you're going to pull back and a guide bushing and the material might get stuck. There's just little things that you always run into. There's not one particular thing that would set apart from, you know, not being in one machine or another thing. It's usually multiple things. So, is there any questions so far? Other things that we think about and things to remember when you're quoting is to make sure that you're using your equipment to its best usage. You know, if you've got parts that are, especially for a Swiss machine, if you've got parts that you're putting in a Swiss machine that you can't get all the work done, you know, maybe that's a reason for you to put that part in a lathe or in a hyperquadrics or a multitasking machine. So that's a big thing. Also understanding the industry that you're doing the work for, because if you can't quote the part right, you can't get the part through the machine, fast enough, you're never gonna be able to physically make enough money to do that. Just because you put it in a Swiss machine doesn't mean that it's not gonna make a better lathe application. We have parts in our shop that we've had in multitasking machines that run faster than they do in Swiss machines. And a good example of that is when you start to have to make up for time on the back side of the machine. There's a lot of times when you only have 4 or 6 or some 8 tool holders on the back side of the machine, you can't get everything done that you need to. So you have to make up for that on the front side. One other thing to think about is when you're working with your lathes and your multitasking machines, even though they have milling capabilities, they're not necessarily a mill. They have the tools in there to do that, but they're not an I-100 or I-250. They're not a straight mill, so you can't really treat them like that. So it's more of a lathe with milling capabilities rather than a mill with turning capabilities. So like say an Interdex. Does anybody have any parts out there that they think that they might want to talk about or have a question about that they have in their shop? That's always something to think about when you're doing a Swiss machine. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. The question was, what batch sizes are you stop at? When you look at a Swiss machine versus a lathe. In a Swiss machine, I don't know, if you go walk into some of these medical companies, they're doing their prototypes over on their Swiss machines, and that's how they make their parts. And so I don't really think that there's any particular reason why you can't do both. Like I said before, it comes down to how much work needs to be done to the part. Can I blank it off faster in a Swiss machine and then do the milling work, or can I finish it complete? A lot of guys, when you're doing prototype work, then one of the advantages of having a Swiss machine, if you have a wide variety of parts that are under a ½ inch, you use that same setup for all your prototypes. If you have 5 prototypes, you can crack them all pretty quick. Disadvantage of that is if I'm going to pick off on the part and all those diameters are different, I may need 5 different collets for pick off. So it's so part based, and that's why this is a really tough subject to even talk about. Because it's all about opinion, and it's about experience. It's about where it's about how your shop is built. If you're adding a Swiss machine is the best thing that we've ever done. Adding hybrid quadrants is also the best thing we've ever done. Because they have their reasons why they're there, and their flexibilities. When you start looking at parts that are over, even though they make 42 millimeters and 48 millimeter Swisses and all that stuff way up there, there are reasons to have machines that are that big in the Swiss department. But when you start talk about massive stock removal and where you're doing a lot of roughing, some of these machines have pinch turning, which is great. But when you start taking the amount of material off, you gotta start looking at, well, is it really worth having that in that machine? Maybe it would fit better in a 65 millimeter machine or a 45 millimeter machine, which is a lathe. The big thing too, I always, as a rule of thumb, if it's bigger than 1.5 inches, it goes in a lathe. The quantities have really never made a difference to me. Sometimes sometimes it's just about what's in the machine and what I can do faster, you know? And that could be in the same case for anybody else here, you know? So, thank you.
You say a large percentage of your cars have to be run on Swiss,
Any part that we run on the Swiss for the moment, I would say 90% of them can be run on a lathe. Yeah, so they don't all have to be. Yeah. Our main decision is usually by cycle time. When you're talking about one of the biggest differences between a Swiss and a lathe, it's the tool change. The quickness of the machine is much faster. These things go 1,000 to 1,400 inches a minute. I mean, they move. RPMs has a lot to do with it. So some of these machines will go 8,000 to 10,000 RPMs. Live tool RPMs make a big difference. Also, the other way, live tool size and horsepower might be the reason why you put a 1-inch part in a lathe, because you're taking off so much material with that milling. That's why it's very, very part based when you start looking at things. Go ahead.
This seems to be the question corner, yes?
Yeah.
When we look at some of the new design bar feeders, the turbo version feeders, they advocate, chipsets. You have chipsets are made at you can see everything to assembly. Do you ever think about that? Do you ever get into setting up your processes where instead of running all the A's, all the B's, all the C's, that you kind of bar nest and do the A, B, and C? Does that make sense, or is that just kind of gimmicky?
No, it does make sense, especially and that's one great option of like the hypers and stuff like that. Not that you can't do it in a Swiss, but most of the time in a Swiss, your collet widths and sizes, although it can be custom made and boarded, you know, it can help you there, but in a lathe, you've got more meat on a collet, which allows you, or even a chuck in that case, which allows you to to actually make 2 or 3 or 4 different parts out of maybe one program, and inject them all at the same time. You know, I mean that's a really good thing to look at. Yep. So we got one way back up there.
Yeah, the place that I see Swiss machines really shining is long, slender parts. I mean, you can't even do them in a conventional lathe. And with a Swiss machine, you can turn a grinder tolerance and a grinder finish done in one.
Yep.
I mean, it's a huge win.
Yeah, that's very true. Although there was a time in the 90s where we had to spot drill every one of those parts and put them in a tailstock and turn the diameter, and it sure is a lot easier to do in a Swiss machine. If you're a gun guy and you're making firing pins, I mean, the Swiss machine is your machine. You know, if you're a gun guy, you're making bolts. The Swiss machine is your machine. If you're looking at making carriers or something like that, the hyperquadrics is the machine that you want. You know, I mean, there's a lot of different. You can load these machines up to the point where they've got 48 tools. You know, so there's a lot of big advantages. Anybody else? All right, right here.
With different material types and different material diameters, what's your approach to any change?
Well, I want more than one Swiss. I mean, that in an ideal world, you know, if you are a Swiss machine shop, this is what we do is we have half-inch machines, we have 3/8 machines, we have 3/4 machines, we have 7/8 machines. You know, we try to divvy that out. Sometimes, depending on what the quantities are, if I have a family of parts and I'm making prototypes, The largest diameter is 3/4. I'll just make it all out of 3/4. It's the same tool job. You just have a little bit more waste of material. Sometimes that waste of material is much less than changing out your guide bushings and changing out your columns. Yeah. So, I'm a strong believer too, because you're talking about material. I don't run any ground stock in my shop. We run aluminum, we run brass, we run stainless. The myth of having to run ground stock, I think is, well, some people don't call it a myth, I guess, but I think it's a myth. You don't really need it unless you're gonna really start getting down into that 1 to 2/10 tolerance. If you got good guys and they're good at what they're doing, they're gonna measure their bars anyways. And plus, your bars, if they come within 5/10 from end to end, you know, that's still an adjustment in your guide bushing if you want to keep a tight collar. So most of the time, these bars, especially stainless, these bars will all come with, they'll be within 5/10 from end to end, you know? So, who else we got? Right back here.
Programming, do you do point-to-point or CAM software, or like, on the Swiss side?
So I'm an old school programmer. I program everything at the machine. Every once in a while, we will get a job that just engrave. If we have to engrave or something like that, then I'll use like a CAD software, or if it's a weird angle into a radius or something like that. More milling stuff than anything. But I do know that Esprit, Part Maker, Mastercam, I mean they all have competitive. Fusion 360, if they were here, I'd give them a shout out, because they have come like millions of miles, and this is the software that's extremely cheap and is really it can really help your company. You know? Are they? Well, there you go. Yeah. So that stuff it's pretty awesome. So, anybody else? Right over here.
No, we have in our shop, we have a 20-foot bar loader, so you can't go 20.
Yep.
Bar loaders, auto bar loaders. And we run water soluble in all of our Swiss machines.
Mhm.
We don't have an issue running 1,000 PSI. But now they have a guy pushing on that's actually flexible over 12,000. It doesn't give you the problem.
Yep.
Because a lot of people that run tools still like, well, we have to grind it. We
Yep.
have to grind it within that range where you have problems.
Mhm.
We also have programmable guide bushings to allow that flex more than you would in a rotating or stationary
Yep.
guide bushing.
Yep.
We have turret machines that you can push 5-inch, 3/4 through.
Mhm.
Just like we have a 150 MSY, and I'll push as much as some of my drops
Yeah.
as I will on my hypercrot drops, if you have the right Swiss machine. Which we have multiple different Swiss machines, but I still push 3/4 through. In dual stick, high pressure.
I mean, depending on any application from Swiss machine to lathe is possible. It's all dependent on what you're doing. You know? So, thank you. What else we got? I know we had some back. Yep, go ahead.
So other than medical, because I just the main industry here with Swiss, what other industries are you seeing utilizing Swiss machining more now?
That's a great question. Really great question. Honestly, fluid power is gigantic in the Swiss area. If you're a firearms guy, you probably already have a few 5, 6, 7 Swiss machines. And that's a huge industry for Swiss machining. It's a volatile one, and will go up and down like crazy, but it's a good one. I know like any kind of valve or intake. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that type of stuff. It seems like the faster you can make something in those situations, the better chance you got it, or you're going to get it. So, aerospace is a big one. When you start looking at cutting heat treated material, same with medical. If you're looking at cutting a heat treated material, a lot of these guys are making drills and stuff like that for back surgery or even implants out of titanium. They're using Swiss machines to do it because of the versatility and the power of the Z-axis. And they can take that material off in one swipe, thread it, do what they have to do with a thread ruler. I mean, you can see guys put grinding wheels in them, so it all depends on the axis, what you want to do. So, thank you. Next. Way back there?
So, either people say Swiss turning with the perception of super long setups. So when you compare that to a multitasking machine, to your Swiss, do you see a benefit? Is there a reduction in setup time? That's always a concern, even on a multitask, isn't that when you're looking at the setups? You find that, you take that into consideration, if you're running it one time or 10 times a week, you take that into consideration. when you're
Yeah,
looking
that's a
at
good question. For those who didn't hear that, his question was, do we take consideration into the setup of a Swiss machine, which is generally the consensus of, say, a Swiss machine would have a longer setup than, say, a multitasking machine or twin spindles machine of some nature. When I'm setting up a Swiss machine, there are a few extra steps that you have to take. You're setting guide bushings, you're changing out 3 collets instead of 2 collets. But in the grand scheme of things, if I'm setting that job up in that machine, it probably means I'm gonna make the time up somewhere else. And that's probably, could be a tooling change, it could be a tooling change, it could be an unmanned operation. But when you look at the two apples to apples, I mean, you still gotta put the tools in a lathe, you still gotta put them in a Swiss. If you're putting in milling stuff, you gotta do that. Essentially, the time that it takes you to do the extra steps in the setup on a Swiss machine, you'll make up in cutoff time and pick-off time, because the Swiss machine will pick off a part, just that much faster. They're usually working in a smaller envelope, so it's a lot easier for them to get over to the sub spindle to travel to the main collet and clamp on the part and cut it off. You also, when that happens, your Z will move and set up for the next part right away. So there's no hesitation about what's next. It's just automatically going into the next part, rather than going home and doing all this other stuff. So there's a lot of time that you can make up in that machine. What?
Or we just preset tools like we do beforehand, preset tools either for a Swiss or for our conventional in our shop, same amount of time.
Yep.
Same amount of time put them in, if they're already qualified.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, you can save time if you preset before you
Mhm.
set the job, you don't have to touch off.
Yep. Yeah, presetters are big. And I know, if you guys didn't get a chance to see some of the Syntraxes out there is a presetter available for the Syntrax. And is it I think it's the first of its kind. So I mean, it's pretty, yeah, I mean, it's pretty remarkable what they can do, so. Next. Tony Bailey?
Yes, sir.
You got a question?
Are you having fun, Chad?
Yeah. Well, now that I don't have to read off this, I'm having fun.
It's on shop rate, that's not compared to the slide and stuff.
Well, a lot of that has to depend on how your shop is set up. I'll use a good example of a company that I know that has one of the most beautiful shops I've ever seen in my entire life, but they can't make any money. And the reason for that is because they have too much overhead. So if you can't make the part that you're looking at, so if you're gonna make washers, you better be able to afford to make washers because they're cheap. If you're gonna make if you're gonna make stuff out of, just brass parts all day long, you're not gonna have any tooling issues, then your shop rate can be, and you're gonna sell the scrap. So you could run brass for $30 an hour, Some people can't, but I mean, that's an option, Other things that I think that make up for shop rate are quantities. When you have, I'll give a good example, when you have a 60,000 part order, and you're gonna get it out in, say, 3 months, well, that's 20 grand a month that's gonna kick off that one machine. Find me a machine in your shop that you can let run, that on a part that's fairly simple, that will make you 20 grand. I mean, there's only, and I'm sure there's jobs, everybody's got one, but, probably not, but, but I mean, that's the way, that's why the Swiss machine is so nice,
Chad,
Tony?
Swiss machines, there's always a little bit of concern about fires, things like that. For folks that don't have them, stories and so forth. So, what type of concerns do you have about that? What sort of?
Well, if you have a Swiss machine or you've seen anything that runs on oil, it's usually it's not if you're gonna have a fire, it's usually when you're gonna have a fire at some point. Fire suppression is a really good idea if you're gonna run unmanned, because it's a concern, Don't think it's not gonna happen to you, because it's happened to me at least 3 times, something that will happen. There's a lot of these guys out there that are running magnesium and Swisses. You can do it. I don't know, I think you can still do it, So, usually the fire problem usually comes when you have I'm not telling anybody that they don't know anything they don't know, but when it's steel on steel, we don't normally worry about the fires when we're on stainless or aluminum. It's usually when a steel holder or steel, maybe a cobalt drill or something of that nature gets either wears out or breaks and then starts rubbing and gets hot. Your mist collectors that you have on top of your machine are really great for the inside of your shop. It makes your shop nice and you don't have oil all over the place, but it's also one of the leading causes of fires, because once that fire starts inside your machine, that mist collector is just feeding it. So, which is why it's important to have a fire suppression system on your Swiss machine. So, yeah, it's more than just a fire extinguisher, but those are handy too. And don't use the white powder ones, use the gas ones, because that's a mess to clean up. What else we got? Good. I appreciate everybody for coming. Thanks for sticking around to hear me, and I hope I didn't bore too many people.